Let's begin to create our jet model by using some curves to create geometry. So there are many ways to create models and geometry here in Maya, and there are three different basic types of geometry that you can use. You don't really need to worry about that right now, but they're NURBS, polygons, and subdivision surfaces. And I just wanted to mention that, if you go through this process and you want to start to learn more about the specifics of modeling tools, different modeling techniques, and the types of geometry that we're using, I'd encourage you to check out, once you're done with this project, the Introduction to Modeling in Maya. Okay, in this particular course, we're going to kind of just get your feet wet with some of the different tools and kind of check out a few different options for building geometry, kind of get you exposed to a few different things, but not really go into too much depth on any one thing. Okay, so one of the ways that we can start to get some geometry in here, we've got our image planes loaded up, is to actually use curves, and curves are closely associated with the NURBS type of geometry. NURBS is a kind of geometry created by calculation and by curves. So curves will allow us to get some nice complex shapes very quickly. So there are several ways that we can bring curves into our scenes. We can draw them out ourselves, or we can use something called curve primitives, which are basically preset shapes that we can use. So let's go up to Create, and let's go to NURBS Primitives, and we'll create a circle. So we'll just drop that into our scene. You can see the circle here in our view, and this isn't something that's going to be seen in the render or anything like that. This is more for construction purposes, but we can see it here in our view. Now, if we want to change the size of our circle, we could scale it up as we scale any other piece of geometry, but we can also go into the actual creation node itself and change the radius. So by going over here to our channel box and choosing the Make NURBS Circle input, we can change the radius here. So you can see I can change that value. I can also put in numerically, how big I want that to be. But you can also transform it, move, scale, rotate it as well. Okay, so let me go ahead and dial this maybe down to something like 40. That's a little bit closer. Now we also have a number here for sections, and the sections are basically the number of points that we can use to shape this. And we can only really see these once we go into something called component mode. So we have the object here. We're in object mode. We're going to go see component mode by clicking on this button, or by right-clicking and choosing one of our components. In this case, I'll choose control vertex, which are the points that allow us to shape this. So you can see here that we have 8 points around that corresponds to this 8 sections. If we go ahead and change this to 12, you can see that number change here. So the more points you have, the more you're able to shape this. Okay, the fewer points you have, the more you can kind of control the overall curve with fewer points, which in many cases can be really advantageous to you. All right, so we have this curve. I'm going to change this to 12 and go back to object mode, and I'm just going to go ahead and scale it up just a little bit. And I want to actually rotate it, because this is going to be kind of serve as the base for this large piece of the fuselage here. So as we start to look at our models and you start to do this, you want to start to look at the different pieces and how you're actually going to create those and kind of break it down that way. So we're going to kind of create the large pieces and then go to the small pieces. So I want to actually rotate this. So I'm going to hit E on my keyboard, the shortcut for rotate. We can choose rotate here. And I just want to rotate it in this X. So I'm going to just grab the ring. And you can see that value here, and I know it's going to be 90 degrees, so I'll go ahead and just input 90 degrees in there. Now you can start to see your curve in all of the different views and how it sort of matches up. Okay, so you can see the size of it here, and then you can see from the side, from the front. So we'll go ahead and leave this curve, and then we'll create a couple of duplicates. So to do that, we'll go ahead and hit Control D on our keyboard. And I'm just going to drag these in our side view or perspective view in the positive Z, bring it up towards the front of the vehicle. Let's select that middle circle, duplicate that again, and drag it towards the back of the vehicle. All right, so we'll leave the shape of this one alone for now, but let's go ahead and take a look at this front one. Now, if we jump in here into the front view, you can see that we actually have a really large shape that's not perfectly circular, and so we need to reshape this. So we'll go into component mode by right-clicking, going to control vertex, and now we can use our move and transform, move and scale tools to move these points around. So we'll take these 2 points on either side, and let's go ahead and use scale to move them out evenly. and then translate those up. And we just want to use the image as a guide. We can grab these and we can sharpen up this corner if we move these up. Okay, you see how that kind of sharpens up that corner there? And then we can do the same thing down here. So just kind of use these points, and I'm just transforming the ones on either side evenly so it's symmetrical. And we'll go ahead and scale this down just a little bit. Okay, I actually want to go ahead and bring these out to the sort of outer outline here of our drawing. And go ahead and pull this one up a bit. Let's grab these and pull these up. So there's a lot you can do with these curves. Now this is still flat in one plane, and so we need to start to look at this from another perspective. Okay, so we've shaped this from the front, but from the side it doesn't match up with this nice curve that we have here. So here's where we'll come in from this view and start to shape it. And this time I only want to move it along this z-axis. Okay, I don't want to move it on any other axis from this view, because I want to have that control over it. Okay, so we can get kind of a nice curve in there. What we're not changing the shape that we created over here. Okay, we're not changing that at all. We're just moving these in the third axis basically. So once we have that, we need to do the back end. Now the back end is going to be much shorter. You can see it's actually this little shape here, and so it's also kind of I want to say it's shaped differently. We can't really see it too much here, although we know that the width is going to remain the same. But basically what we want to do is go ahead and grab the bottom of this and start to move this up. And I want to actually grab the center here and move it up a little bit. And so I just want to kind of grab this whole thing, move it up. I want to kind of get this down, and you just want to create, we want to have kind of 3 thrusters back here. And so I want to create this kind of area for these 3 circles basically. Okay, and you can see here when you're starting to get close as far as the height of it goes. So we can kind of move that up. We know where the width is. Okay, now once we get this close, we can come in here from the side and modify this curve so that it matches also from the side view. Again, moving it in a single axis this time, and moving those across. Okay, so we end up with something like this. Okay, now this curve, this initial circle, you can kind of see where we actually want that to kind of come up here. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and kind of squish this down a little bit, just scaling it in a single axis and move it up, because it's still got a little bit of width there. You know, you still want to have that width, so I'll kind of squeeze it down. So we've got 3 curves now, but we still don't have any geometry. So what are we going to do? We're going to create geometry that's going to span from this curve to this curve to this curve. And the way that we do this is to use a loft. Okay, and the order of the curves that we select is going to be important, because it's going to tell Maya how we want to actually create this geometry. So if we want to create it from here to here to here, we need to select it that way. So let's go ahead and select this initial curve. Let's shift select the middle curve, and then shift select the last curve. Now right now we're in our polygons menu set. We need to change out of this and go into surfaces whenever we're working with curves and NURBS surfaces. So choose surfaces. That changes up some of the menu items here, and we can go now into surfaces, and let's choose loft. Okay, so you can see we've got this, what looks like these wires flowing through here. If we want to now see this in a shaded mode, we want to go to shading and change this to smooth shade all. And now we can see that we actually have geometry that's being created between these 3 curves. And at this curve, it takes on this curve shape, kind of blends into this circular curve in the middle, and then by the time it gets to the end, it's this shape that we have over here. And if we go ahead and turn on our wireframe on shaded, you can see where those corresponding lines are going. So if we want to kind of straighten this up a little bit, we can take some of these curves And the geometry is live, so that if I move some of these curves around, the geometry automatically updates. So I can start to move some of these curves up, or I could come in here and start to take some of these curves down a little bit to just kind of straighten this up slightly. Okay. Now we also want to have a little bit more of a bump in here. So at any time, once you, as long as you still have the curves, you can always get that loft back. And so I can go ahead and delete the loft, take this curve and duplicate it, move it up here, and then let's go ahead and scale it back out so it's more of that complete circle there. And let's move it down. Okay. Now we have 4 curves. And so what we can do is simply recreate that loft. Again, selecting those in order, going now to loft, and you can see now that we can start to get a little bit more shape in there with our loft. And you can see how it's very, very smooth right now. So let's go ahead in the next lesson and shape this lofted geometry a little bit more, and then we'll also start to add some thickness around here, because right now it is just razor thin, and so we want to actually make this look like a machined piece. So we'll take a look at those things coming up in the next lesson.